Okay, I want to talk about acceptance and letting go and meditation because they're not verbs. They're actually not something you do. But I do realize this is like maybe a popular misconception. And yeah, I just did a video about releasing desires, and and it's in the category of letting go. And I'm just thinking, okay, if I was making this video to the previous spiritual seeking, suffering self that was me in the past, would that have been helpful, or what would I have misperceived? And I think it is this actual very concept. Now, as a separate, like someone who identified as a separate self, I would have listened to a video about letting go and I would think, okay, cool, this is a technique I can add. And I would have tried to let go or tried to accept. And I never thought about this until today. I was thinking about it. And these can both be traps. They sound good, but as a spiritual concept, it can really be a trap versus something that you realize, something you not even become, because becoming can be a doing. And again, this is not something that I tried to do, it's just what happened. So I want to give a little progression of how this played out for me. So when I was a very ego-centered, selfish, not selfish, just ego, I was thought identified. I just viewed everything as separate from me. So if I got a technique, I would use it and I would try it. And if I thought it didn't work or I didn't like it, I would stop doing it, which is a weird concept. So meditation starts as something you do. You sit down and you meditate. And then you do that long enough, at least for me, I did it long enough to where I became meditation. I don't know a better way to say it. To where every second of every day, whether I'm awake, whether I'm asleep, I mean, it doesn't matter. I am meditation. So it's not something I do, but I kind of felt and understood that with meditation because it's an easier concept. But that same reality happens in every area. So I have recently heard some things about letting go that I thought, oh no, this is a trap. And I've talked about it, but I just never thought about it like this. So if you take the concept of letting go and say you're angry and you need to dig down and get to the bottom of your anger and let it go so you don't get angry again, or you can't seem to figure that out, so maybe acceptance is the route. So we get angry and then we accept it. Now, both of those sound good, but in essence, it's not true. There is no separate self that needs to let go or accept anything. Acceptance just is who you are, because if anything is happening, it's being accepted as it is because it's happening. There is no separate person accepting it. Like, I don't need to accept that it's raining for it to be raining. I don't need to accept the fact that I'm hearing my voice right now. I'm just hearing my voice right now. There just is what is. There actually is an acceptance. And there isn't letting go because it happens every second in any experience. They come and they go. Like every snapshot, every nanosecond, it comes and it goes, it comes and it goes, it comes and it goes. So there's acceptance and letting go at the same time, all the time, when you're not viewing it from a separate self. And there's nothing wrong with this. This is just part of the process, I think. We all just have to do practices from the separate self until that identity starts to shift and dissolve. And what happens is if you're doing any practice deep enough or long enough, it will shift your identity. And this is the part that changes everything, because you don't learn a concept. I'm not getting on here talking about something that I learned. I'm trying to convey a way that I live now, because my identity shifted or dissolved. into no identity. So you can that's why I've said in previous videos, shifting your identity from something negative to positive is actually beneficial. You can take a drug addict and make him addicted to a religion. And it's the same concept. People don't see this, but there is positive change because he's changed who he thinks he is. But then the next step, if you're progressing on this path, is the dissolution of identity itself. And now when that happens, that's when there's an ego death and all this crazy stuff that people are talking about in the awakening circle of people, because your identity itself just starts to unravel, dissipate, and everything goes haywire because your separate self very much wants something to hold on to. And in truth, there is no separate self and there is nothing to hold on to. So all of that goes bye-bye, along with letting go, acceptance, meditation, all that stuff. This is why, in my opinion, I think great spiritual masters don't really ever talk about specific techniques or practices because they don't matter. They do when you're starting and you are viewing the world as a separate self. Then practices and techniques do matter. But eventually, those practices are what lead to the annihilation of the practice. If that made any sense. And yeah, the practice doesn't matter. What really matters is what you're feeling and experiencing and perceiving right now in this very moment. Even when you're watching this video. Is what I'm saying giving you a positive feeling? Is what I'm saying frustrating you? Because that's what to feel into and to look into. Now, I used to watch videos a while ago as a separate self, and I would get so frustrated listening to these guys because they made no sense to me. But something in me, something deep down, knew there was truth in it. And as frustrated as I got, I just knew that there was something there. And so I let my brain back up a little bit, and I just thought, okay, I'll listen to a couple videos here and there, maybe a few a week, and I'm not going to try to figure it out with my mind because that's frustrating me. I know there's truth in it. I'm just going to listen. I'm going to let it be. I'm going to keep meditating. Now, eventually, it wasn't what I learned or what I heard from these people talking about it. It's what was happening in me, in my practices, that were dissolving the identity. Now, as my identity dissolved and everything just was felt and broke open and widened, and I just experienced life for the first time without looking through the eyes of all of my filters, suddenly everything that frustrated me in those videos, all the stuff those guys were talking about, made sense. It was just like one day it didn't and one day it did. And then I just stopped watching them because I became what they were. I entered the place that they were speaking from. But here's the thing no one tells you. And like, it's not linear and it's not a progression that you can map, which is so hard because as I'm practicing with dedication and devotion every day, I was trying to awaken and I was trying to focus and do that, laser pointed focus and all that stuff you do in meditation. I didn't realize that because it was working, I started to want to do it less and less. And I started to be less interested in spiritual practices. And eventually I started to be not even really interested in spirituality. And then I started thinking, oh my God, what's happening? I'm losing my mind. Like all this is for nothing. I don't even care anymore. And I thought it was bad. I viewed it as something negative, something bad. I was like falling out of practice. What was actually happening was all those techniques and practices were working. This is the thing. The separate self wants to awaken and starts doing all these practices, and then the practices dissolve slowly the identity structure of the separate self. Now, when that starts dissolving, all the practices don't make any more sense because you start becoming everything. And you start to see that all these practices are built on you, not the other way around. Like, you are the foundation of the house, okay? So say it's being built. It's got one story, and then there's talks of adding a second story. As the foundation of the house, does anything change if they add a second story? I don't think so. I'm not a carpenter. I could be wrong. What about a balcony? What about an extra window? What if the last minute they want to add another bathroom? Or bring somebody on the crew that's, hasn't been working there the whole time? Or the weather changes while they're working on the house. None of that affects or touches the foundation. So yeah, as the identity dissolves, you actually feel like you're losing focus. You're losing practices. And as it dissolves to the point of maybe it only has a few things to hold on to, then it really goes into panic mode. Then things get hard. Then you start feeling very touchy and interesting. And things get, as I've said in other videos, things get worse or appear to get worse. But what's actually happening is fundamentally good. So you're on a path and you think this is the path to liberation. And the farther you go down that path, the narrower it gets. And you start getting very comfortable with how narrow it is. And then you get to a point where there's nobody else on the path and you are just up there and you're feeling like, I'm doing good. I am way ahead. People haven't made it this far. This is awesome. And then something scary happens. The path there starts to be holes in it. And you think, okay, I'll just step around these holes, no problem. And then they get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then the path completely dissolves in an instant. And so does everything else. And you are floating in nothing. There's no path. There's no direction. And then you look down and you can't even see your own body. And you just think, shit. I thought I was going somewhere. I thought I was doing good. What happened? I'll tell you, what happened is exactly what was supposed to happen. But when you're in it, it doesn't feel like progress. That's maybe, what I'm trying to get at here. It feels the opposite. But I assure you it's okay. Anyway. All this to say, you will start doing things from the separate self, and that's perfectly fine. And that will eventually dissolve it will just eventually dissolve. And don't worry about trying to understand this stuff. Just keep doing what you're doing. Find out what's true, dig into yourself, feel, see where there's resistance, and relax. All the techniques. Do all the techniques until you don't need them anymore. But that transition from doing to being it's rocky. It's a bit interesting. There's nothing I can do or say that's going to help. If you're on the path, you're destined to find this part of the path eventually. And good luck. Hopefully something I said in there will help somebody. I'm sure it will. And as always, thanks for watching.